Running from January 22nd to 25th, Davos has attracted a wide range of global business leaders and politicians for its annual meeting of the World Economic Forum. At the gathering, China's Vice President Wang Qishan delivered a defense of globalization that was very positive about the future of economic growth, both for China and for the world. So how can Davos help deliver new progress in an increasingly divided world? What positive role can China play for the international community? And with many talking about the coming fourth industrial revolution, what breakthroughs are possible for globalization and what risks will it continue to face? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Liu Xiaochao, Senior Fellow at the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies of Renmin University of China. We shall also speak via satellite to Jin Keyu, Professor of Economics at the London School of Economics, and David Eggman, Chief Representative Officer in China of the World Economic Forum, both in Davos. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Welcome to our show, Professor Liu. The annual meeting of the 2019 World Economic Forum has the theme of Industrial Revolution 4.0. Now, what does that mean for the future of both the Chinese economy and the world?
I think in the years to come that we are quite positive to see the development in China and also the world economy. Even we have so many terminals and also turbulences happened in the past years. But I think for the so-called 4.0 industrial revolution, I think this is quite a new topic for the whole world. We discussed this point since last year. We can see what happened in 1 year. So I think we have only tensions between the countries that for developing countries and the developed countries. We don't have enough time to pay more attention how to develop the 4.0 industrial revolution. Investment in this series is not so enough, and also the instrument that we have taken to promote this 4.0 industrial revolution is still not enough, also not adequate to develop such a concept. So in this way that we need another 2 or 3 years to develop this area, because at the moment the pressing issue for the whole world is to discuss the trade tension between the countries. When these questions are solved, we can pay more attention and more investment in the so-called 4.0 industrial revolution. So at the moment, I think still a little bit too early to discuss or to develop this issue. But fortunately, that China has paid a lot of attention to have more investment and more efforts and more talented in this section, because we have learned our experiences that we should pay more attention to start our work in the new technology in advance. So we cannot lose or wait any time that when the other countries already catch up. So in this way, China, I think, is just some countries, only few countries that we have invested and we have paid more attention to this issue in the past years. We achieved a lot of good results.
Thank you so much. Let me cross over to Madam Jin Keyu, who's standing by in Davos. Hello, Madam Jin. For years, observers, Chinese and foreign alike, have developed their individual interpretations about what the globalization 4.0 actually means. The issue I raise here for you and Professor Liu is, do you believe digital technology or digital-enabled services constitutes a solution, or should we regard it as a troublemaker when we look at the future of the world economy, particularly trade tensions between the United States and China?
As we all know, financial innovation is perennially a double-edged sword, so we have to consider both sides. There is no question that digital services will bring about not only more efficiency to the economy, but also greater welfare to the people, especially in the fintech area, where financial inclusion will help those who are usually excluded from financial markets, just to give one example. And of course, technology is the solution to many of today's pressing problems, but what we also lack in the world is political leadership and coordination, which is equally important, that complements this evolution and revolution. That said, it is true that in today's world, globalization is facing a crisis. Now, if we have U.S. and China being in a heated debate and heated conflict over trade, goods trade, when frankly these two countries are not even producing and trading the same things and not really in competition mode, can you imagine when the fourth industrialization arrives, when these two countries have to be in competition with the same kind of products, namely technology, artificial intelligence, and all of the like, what that state of the world would be like? Today, with the trade disputes still ongoing, one has to realize that there are many synergies between these economies in exchanging goods and ideas and flows of information, and the two countries are already in a heated debate. And when the next next industrial revolution, next globalization 4.0 really arrives, then we have to be bracing for greater tensions that will come along down the line.
Vice President Wang Qishan said in his keynote presentation that China opts for cooperation instead of confrontation with the United States, and you spoke of good trade. What do you mean by good trade? Does it mean free trade or fair trade for the two economies? The United States accuses China of violating IPR, and we come under huge pressure on charges of industrial espionage. Everything seems to be related more or less to the advent of digital technology in the 21st century. I'd like to have your thoughts, Yu.
Of course, the initial point of dispute was over the trade surplus between the U.S. and China, and over the exchange rates and current account surplus. We all know that these are only symptoms of the conflict. They're not really the causes of the conflict. Of course, China's goal is to uphold globalization, uphold the multilateral system in its current form, even if it's in need of a reform, and therefore China will make certain kind of concessions to the U.S. on trade, which is a price worth paying for to uphold the multilateral system. Now, that said, many of these concessions made in China to the U.S. is actually good for China in the long run. China believes in adopting better and fairer trade practices, and if we really look at the trade between these two countries, while China exports certain kind of goods, America will export a significant amount of financial services, given the new liberalization of financial markets that has been pronounced recently by the Chinese government. So it is probably fair to say that China recognizes that there are certain areas that China can improve on in terms of its trade practices, although there are still many things up for negotiation between the two countries. But the basic underlying kind of motto is we need to uphold globalization.
Yes, indeed. Even a couple of years ago, when President Xi Jinping was in Davos to deliver his analysis on the world economy, he also called for globalization, and China should assume a kind of leadership when we get so fast to the center stage of the world economy. Professor Liu, what do you make of the speech by Vice President Wang Qishan? He seems to aim at diffusing the current tensions between the two economies ahead of Vice President Liu He's visit to Washington.
I think for his major job in Davos is to tell the whole world that what China is thinking about trade tension with America and what's the solution, what we are concerned about the situation now. I think the first point that we have to see very clearly that China thinks about differences with the United States on different issues. Actually, the globalization is a globalized issue. It not belongs to America, not belongs to China itself. It belongs to the whole world. That the whole world should have the same rights to discuss this point. And also, one thing we have to be appointed that China has never confessed that China is a country that we spionage technology with other countries. We didn't have so-called violating the international law to force the foreign country to transfer the technology to change the market. As we know, such things that happened before, not only China, the same, we learned a lot from the whole world, even from America at the very beginning, with the technology to change, to replace the market. So this is something that we learned from the developed countries. Of course, another thing, IPR. We have to discuss case by case, by the justice, by the law system. So we cannot, in general speaking, now I mean that Wang Qishan has a very difficult job to announce that China is not the country as you think, as you mentioned, as you talked. China is a defender of the globalization. Not only China, that so-called, has enjoyed the advantage of the globalization. Globalization made advantage to everybody in the same time. So
but I'm afraid the West is quite suspicious of the intent behind our building of the Belt and Road Initiative. They accuse China of trying to rebuild the world on the Chinese terms. Let me cross over to David Eggman. Hello, David. Let's take a second look at what Vice President Wang Qishan says in his presentation. Mr. Wang says innovation and the emergence of a new technology would produce challenges to certain sets of regulations and standards, and these rules need to be constantly adjusted and reformed based on reality. Everybody understands that most of our partners in the West are so concerned with the alleged violation of current rules, the existing ones. But why did Vice President Wang Qishan made no secret of our intent to somehow adjust the rules so that we and the rest of the world can live up to each other's expectations?
This is the challenge of the fourth industrial revolution, isn't it? Is that governments around the world are trying to strike that balance between trying to protect the citizens and data and ensure that the regulations are fit for purpose, while at the same time not stifling innovation entirely. And it's a very, very difficult balancing act for regulators around the world, because the pace of regulation tends to move slower than the pace of technological innovation. So one of the things the World Economic Forum is doing is working with governments worldwide on these fourth industrial revolution technology policy issues to try and develop regulation that can be more flexible and more adaptable as technology is changing, but also protect the rights of the citizens, also look at protecting the rights of the environment, and so on and so forth.
Some of the members of the Chinese delegation took issue with privacy, which has always been prioritized in the West when it comes to the rapid development of digital technology, and we live in an age of big data, and artificial intelligence has quickly become a catchphrase in the Chinese vocabulary, particularly in the IT industry. However, in this particular area, I'm afraid Europeans, along with Americans, have shown their particular concerns about the protection of privacy. Do you think this issue of privacy will get in the way of your digital technology in the West?
Sure. Well, listen, I think this is a perfect example of what we describe as not only a multipolar world, but a multi-conceptual world. Because actually China and the West and other countries have very different concepts of the way these technologies can be used, not only to create economic benefit, but also to create social benefit as well. And so it's very difficult right now, I would say, to judge which model is better. By allowing more access to big data with the healthcare system in China, for example, it may be possible to yield better results in terms of treating cancer, in terms of identifying diseases, and the collaboration that exists between the government and companies can be very fruitful. The West has a different concept of how this should work. Who's to say which one is better? And what we're trying to do is bring all of those different concepts together into dialogue to say, different countries and different regulators may have different approaches, but we still need to find interoperability, and we still need to try and yield some sort of global standards or some sort of global coordination and cooperation. It's a very challenging role, but it's one we think is needed, because many of these technologies don't necessarily respect national borders. They're global in their nature, so we better get working on dialogue between those different concepts.
Thank you so much. That's David Eggman. We are talking about why China is likely to go way ahead of the West in terms of digital technology on the issue of transparency and the protection of privacy. The West and the East may somehow differ slightly. But when we come back, we'll take a closer look and have more such discussions. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Now let me go back to Ke Yu. Mr. Wang Qishan struck, can you hear me clearly, Ke Yu?
Yes, 1 second. Yeah, let me just, it's always popping out. Okay, I'm good.
All right, Wang Qishan struck a very positive note on China's economic growth during a dialogue with Klaus Schwab, founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. Mr. Wang stressed that China would definitely beat expectations on its mission of achieving a moderately prosperous society in all respects by the end of 2020. In general, he gave us a rosy picture about our ability to sustain the growth. What do you make of the Chinese note of optimism?
I think the optimism is there for the long run. I think that there's a lot of latent potential that can be unleashed, especially in the private sector, especially among Chinese households. The difficulty I see currently is not the short-run symptoms, the debt levels or the slowing growth rate. The challenge is really how to reform the financial sector so as to bridge the resources, the massive amount of saving that China has, and allocate it efficiently to the firms that really need it. That is to say, an efficient allocation of capital towards the higher productivity firms. Once that conduit is open and works and functions properly, then you can really unleash this latent dynamism of the private sector, which is, today contributing to about 70 to 80% of the country's output and potentially much more. We always talk about how China has the potential through its entrepreneurship, its innovation, the increasing services, the digital economy, urbanization. Yes, these are all potentials, but they will remain potentials so long as the financial sector is still underdeveloped.
Professor Liu, Ke Yu spoke of the promising aspects of the driving force behind the sustainability of the Chinese economic expansion despite the downward pressure. What do you think are the major driving forces that the Chinese authorities and entrepreneurs may rely on in the year 2019 and in the foreseeable future? Because we used to contribute up to 30% to the world economic recovery, but it may not be so pretty soon.
I think the forecast of Mr. Wang Qishan has good reason and also good grounds because of two reasons. One is that in China we have a policy reserve. What's the policy reserve? Because China's policy tool, we have many things that to explore. Especially in the policy making, we still have some rules that to provide more favorable policies to stimulate the economy. So at the moment, for instance, for the financial market, we have to open up widely, and also from the so-called second industry area that we have to open up to the whole world. So there are many chances that from the policy making. That's why I said that we have policy reserve that for the future development. And the second, also we have reserved some market potentials. In China, the market potential is unlimited. We can see in the past 40 years that every year or every 2 years we have all new driving forces that occurred. What happened? Because the market potential always developed according to the situation. And also China is very key that to take all the advantages in the right time to make a right decision to stimulate the economy. So market potential for China is very essential, very important. As Wang Qishan said, the efficiency of the market, efficiency of the administration is quite important. The efficiency can become very good productivity, so can make a great contribution to GDP. So in all these areas, for instance, the service industry, like financial industry, infrastructure industries, we have so many that areas are still underdeveloped. So we have great market potential. That's why many foreign investors are keen to come to China, because they see the potentials. So this is what we see, that optimism from Wang Qishan, also from the whole nation, is very optimistic.
Yes, indeed, the size does matter. Let me go back to David. Now, many economists, such as former top banker Liu Xiaochao, said recently in his speech at a Boer Forum meeting on a casual occasion, that the big market and the sizable army of the middle-income consumers in China will help account for more of the GDP through a huge appetite of consumption. However, the issue, by the end of the day, I'm afraid, is whether we're going to have income redistribution or reasonable tax breaks in the rates. What do you think of the potential for the domestic consumption, which increasingly will become the major driver to sustain the growth, right?
Well, I think, again, to put the numbers into context, 6.6% growth is very healthy. 1.2 trillion added to the global economy. That's like adding the economy of Mexico. And where is that growth coming from? That growth is coming from the transformation of China's economy. And as the previous speaker just said, there's still so much potential in the market in terms of that rising middle-class consumer. You look at the e-payments and the e-commerce, the giants that are doing so successfully in the Chinese market, but we still have half of the population that's not connected to that internet infrastructure. And so I think, China's long-term investment into infrastructure, the efforts making to bridge that digital divide, are all, policy steps and investments taken in the right direction in order to be able to capitalize on that market potential. That's not to say it's not without its hurdles. The income inequalities that are rising as a result of that transformation are something that should worry policymakers everywhere. But I think the Chinese government is very conscious about that and is working very hard to make sure that the incredible growth that China is experiencing is both inclusive and sustainable.
Ke Yu, can you hear me? There are many issues concerning the domestic consumption. For example, earlier I talked to David about income redistribution in terms of tax breaks and rates. What about channels for the individual investment? For example, we don't have a very promising real estate market, do we? And we don't have a reliable and stable stock market either in China. And therefore, with the mountains of domestic savings, what are we going to do with these savings? I mean, you cannot just depend on the banks for the modest, return in the banks. So what do you make of the investment opportunities at this defining moment of domestic consumption, Ke Yu?
Well, I think this is a very important question when it comes even to domestic consumption, because the Chinese households need to feel wealthy. They need to feel that there is enough for old age retirement in order for them to spend. And when there are few investment opportunities for the Chinese households, inevitably they will start to save even more. So I think that asset management today in China is one of the most needed financial services that is still currently unavailable. I'm hoping that with the recent liberalization of financial services, with the arrival of foreign banks and foreign financial institutions, that would bring not only competition for domestic financial institutions, but also bring about a number of financial products that will help the Chinese citizens better diversify their saving. Because everything, as we know, is very much correlated in China, whether across all the asset classes. So if there's any downturn, economic downturn in China, then it's very possible that a substantial part of people's saving can be wiped out, and that will be very, very dangerous. So we need to look for solutions for diversification of people's assets across asset classes, but also across different currencies. And so when the current financial opportunities are restricted to real estate or a non-performing stock market or very low rates of real returns and bank deposits, the Chinese households have very little to choose from. But this is part of the financial system reform that I was talking about, and also with financial service liberalization going forward, I'm hoping that there will be substantial improvement on that front.
Thank you so much for your inspiring and somehow philosophical interpretations about the current pressure that China comes under from the United States to open up financial market, including financial services further, despite the closure of a capital account. So what do you think of the political will by the Chinese authorities to open up a financial market so that we're going to have more return of the household investment?
This question is quite sensitive and also very essential for Chinese society. You know, the Chinese government is very cautious when we are talking about the capital market, the opening up. In the past 30 years, we have tried our best to coordinate the opening up of the financial market. But in fact, there are some areas that still not time ensured that to open up its market. Because at the moment, we find that the financial market is the bottom line for the so-called security of one country. Because the state security is one word very regularly mentioned by the American politicians. We have to pay more attention about the state security. The financial market is more secure, more important in this sense. So that's why the Chinese government and even Chinese people are very cautious when we are talking about the financial market to open, especially the capital market. Two preconditions when we open up our capital market. First, we have enough the capital liquidity. And the second, the real industry is strong enough that to deal with all the difficulties and turn chaos from the world outside. So if all these two basic questions are really issued or resolved, then we can be encouraged enough to talking about our capital market, the financial market opening up. Oh, the financial market opening up doesn't mean that we invite the foreign investor to put their money in our bank or to borrow money from the bank freely. Or the question is that when the foreign capital inflow in the Chinese market, how we can deal with this. So this is the outflow and the inflow. That
without opening up the capital account, you cannot expect the RMB to have full convertibility, and you won't account for bigger shares in transaction settlement in our global business. So now let me get back very quickly to David for his thoughts on what's going to happen next when Vice Premier Liu He visits Washington to hopefully settle the trade disputes. What's your prediction, David?
Well, I think after talking to leaders in Davos this week, I'm cautiously optimistic that there is ground for negotiation. I think there are, as Keyu was saying earlier, there are some areas of mutual interest where it would be both in China's interest and the United States to reach accommodation and to find solutions. I think the situation is complicated by the fact that some of the issues on the table are really long-term structural issues or related to the tectonic shifts that have been happening in the global economy due to the fourth industrial revolution. So there are issues around technology policy or so on and so forth, particularly around these new industries that we were talking about earlier before. So I think, you know, in my view, we should look at this as hopefully let's avert a crisis. Let's hope that China and the United States can get things back on track. Because we don't need a drag on the global economy, but then set up a process and a framework and a dialogue mechanism to resolve the longer-term issues that are just going to take a lot more than 90 days.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you, Keyu and Professor Liu. Yes, indeed, the solution to any of the structural issues between the United States and China will take a lot more time. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.